Hello, everyone. We are live. Welcome to the People's Basics. Today is March 31st. And today on the program, we're going to be doing something a little bit different. We're not going to be reacting to any news stories. We're not going to be talking to another guest. We're not going to be doing a breakdown of an individual, basic of society. What we're going to be doing today is we're going to be taking some political tests. We've been talking to people of a wide variety of political ideologies. And so, periodically I like to come and test myself and see how I align to try and, see how my political beliefs are being shaped over time from having all these conversations with a wide variety of perspectives. Because, it's not we're bringing people in here just to say their beliefs. We're bringing people in here to listen. We're not always going to agree with them and we're going to give pushback, but we're here to listen. And so, for you all to have proper clarity into not just the, policies that we advocate here in democracy reform and the universal basics, but just kind of holistically, ideologically, where I align, I want to take two tests for you all. And so they are pretty classic tests. One is the political compass test, and the second one is the 9-axis test. So I'm going to be looking to go along. Please let me know if you have any comments of if I say something about a certain question that you want clarification on. I want to make sure if anyone wants clarification that I can give it during this live stream. That being said, let's get into our first test. And we're going to be doing the political compass test first. So let me share my screen with you all so that you can see the test. And you know what? I'll go into full screen mode for this and we'll go back out as we need if I need to give a more detailed explanation. So this has 6 pages. We're going to answer each of these as we go along. So if economic globalization is inevitable, it should primarily serve humanity rather than the interests of transnational corporations. I strongly agree with that statement. At the end of the day, corporations don't need food to survive. Corporations don't need healthcare to survive. What corporations need to survive, frankly, is people. So I think this one to me is fairly obvious why we're going to go with strongly agree that it should primarily serve humanity rather than the interests of transnational corporations. Next, I'd always support my country whether it was right or wrong. I guess this is a bit vague. I'm going to go with disagree. Am I going to try and necessarily go to war with my fellow countrymen? I don't think so. That's why I'm not putting it into strongly disagree. But I think that we need to call out wrongdoing by our own nation in order for us to improve. So I'm not going to support every action of my own country. And I think we're a little bit foolish to just solely define ourselves as solely loyal to one country. We are people first. And I think that needs to be reflected a lot more. I have opinions of why nations can still be good, but I think this notion of blind faith patriotism is overall harmful. And we got to talk about that a lot more yesterday on our Commoners Corner with Grace and Asbeth. So yeah, that's how I'm going to put it. I'm going to put disagree there. Next one. No one chooses their country of birth, so it's foolish to be proud of it. So we just talked about this. I think we have too much pride in it, but I don't want to say that it's foolish to have any pride in it. Because if you think about it, it is your past generations of ancestors who have contributed to this country. They are the ones who've built this up. If you are a first generation immigrant, your parents sacrificed to be able to come to this country because they knew that it could potentially provide a better life for their family and themselves. So I think there is reason to be proud, but it is not pride in country itself as much as it is the pride of the accomplishments of our fellow countrymen. Because again, countries are still they're a made up artificial concept. So it's do we want to be prideful in that, or do we want to be prideful in the communities that we've had here? And I get it. It's a little esoteric, but I do think we need to have more pride in the people and the communities, less than the concept of nation. But I don't think it's foolish for people to have some pride in what's been accomplished. So I'm going to say disagree, actually. I put agree, but I read the question wrong. So it says no one chooses their country birth, so it's foolish to be proud of it. I disagree with that. People can be somewhat proud of their country. Next, our race has many superior qualities compared with other races. Strongly disagree. We are all equal. We are not in an equal system, but we all have the innate capability of being equal, regardless of the color of our skin. Next, the enemy of my enemy is my friend. This is a complicated thing. It kind of depends on degrees. Like we can share like an alliance and trying to take down this other enemy, but I don't think that makes you my friend. We need to be friends because we have respect for each other, not disrespect for another. So I'm going to strongly disagree with that. Next, military action that defies international law is sometimes justified. I'm actually going to semi-agree on that. Like, I don't want to strongly agree on that, but here's the thing. To say otherwise is to say that every international law that is dictated is just. And I don't think that is inherently the case. There are going to be laws that are unjust and countries are just in, not following those laws. Now, mind you, 99% of the time, they're solid laws. Like, I'm not saying that most of the laws are broad, but like, this is very absolutist. So, it's saying it's sometimes justified. And so I'm like, yeah, sometimes if there's an unjust law that is being imposed. But I think most of the time we should be upholding international law. So, yeah, I do think sometimes, but it is like so rare, and it really does have to be not just like national security interest, but like imminent danger threat to our citizens to justify such a thing. Next, there is now a worrying fusion of information and entertainment. I have a lot of feelings on this, frankly. Here's the thing. We are trying to provide content. Right now, what you are watching is a form of information and entertainment. If we were not entertaining, frankly, none of you would watch. That's the fact of the matter. Like, if we are just producing something boring, your attention is going to go somewhere else. But if we're just feeding you garbage and all the things you already wanted, we're not doing the job of properly informing you all and providing, in my opinion, actual value. Like, there are a million shows you can go get entertainment from. But I think when it comes to the provisioning of information, we do have a little bit too much sensationalism. We are so used to eating the fast food of news and the clickbait headlines, and we aren't willing to like dig deep into the information, really look at the data, and actually hear out other opinions too on the issues. So there is, but I will say, like, trying to be entertaining, like the news cannot just go back to being like boring, or it won't thrive. It just won't. And the thing is, you want the information to get out to people. And so it should be, something people don't like resent having to sit through because it's boring them to death. So there is a balance. I think it's tipped a little bit too far in the direction of entertainment. So I'm going to agree. But I do think that there is a need for making news entertaining. Next, people are ultimately divided more by class than by nationality. Boy, I mean, I'm going to agree, but I'm not going to deny that we do not have distinctions by our nationalities. We have our own distinct cultures based on our countries. And so I'm not going to say that we're not divided on that. But I do think that we have a lot more common struggle of understanding what it's like to not have healthcare, of understanding what it's like to not have housing or income, or all these things of just trying to be able to survive, that I think are really common bonds. And so when it comes to divisions, I think a person in a poor country is going to have a lot more understanding for another poor person in another country than they are going to have that relation with a rich person in their own country. Now, mind you, there can be exceptions. I'm not saying every rich person is completely out of touch, but, I think that divide is a little bit larger than nationality. Next, controlling inflation is more important than controlling unemployment. Yeah, I actually kind of agree with that statement. Because here's the thing. If your sole metric is unemployment, there's going to be a lot of factors that are going wrong. One, it assumes that in order to be producing value for society, you need to have a wage-based job or have a business that's creating money for yourself. It does not count any of the contributions of, volunteering for your community, staying home with your children, or, taking care of an elderly loved one. All these things are not counted as, part of a job. And these people are still, potentially considered unemployed, or at least not part of the labor force participation rate, depending on like if they're actually looking for work while doing that. But like inflation is a barrier that we're all going to have to face in trying to buy things. So like take, for example, a universal basic income. We can make sure that everyone has a basic income in society to be able to afford the things that they need. They don't necessarily have to be so tied to a job to be able to afford those basic things. But if inflation goes too high, that makes our universal basic income not go as far. So I generally think we need to be looking to control inflation more. And it's related to work. If we get more people working, that will increase productivity, which will increase supply, which will make sure that prices don't go up as high. So they're very related, but I agree. Inflation is the bigger issue than unemployment, because at the end of the day, the role of humans isn't to work, it's to live. And working can make us have a better life and be able to live more. But that's not their role. Their job is not to just work. It is to be able to live and contribute. So I agree with this statement. Next, because corporations cannot be trusted to voluntarily protect the environment, they require regulation. Strongly agree. Classic example, water supply. You want to use your own private water supply as a dumping ground because it's cheaper. And guess what? That has downstream impacts that impact us all. And, libertarian would basically say, or not every libertarian, but like a lot of them would say like, yeah, it's their property right. They should be able to do with that as they will. But I think they can even recognize that this is a violation of the non-aggression principle to be able to dump and have it go downstream. And so you need some form of regulation to enforce that, because guess what? You're going to have a power imbalance and you need something that can supersede that. And I think government authority is that group that supersedes the corporate power. So I strongly agree they require regulation. And no, it's not good enough to just say, oh, if you don't like them polluting, just go boycott them. Go pick another business to do business with. Well, no, it doesn't work that easily. A lot of markets don't have that many choices within it. And so, yeah, no. And there are also industries specifically that need this regulation on all actors in it, not just like one individual bad actor within the industry. So, yeah, strongly agree. Regulation is required. Next, from each according to his ability, to each according to his need, is a fundamentally good idea. I have mixed feelings on this. I think generally I agree, but I guess it's like, is this to try and be completely equalized? Is this to be like, what are we defining it as individual need? Some people might have a different definition of what they need, and sometimes it's just a want. But overall, I do agree with this notion that, people who produce more should be helping out those who need more. And it can be the same person, so they might be able to keep it for themselves if they need it. But I think people should be able to go as far as they can, but that, as you keep progressing and getting further and further away from people, the difficulty level to keep going further and further away from people economically should get harder. So I'm going to agree. I'm going to move on from there. Next, the freer the market, the freer the people. I disagree with that, but this is another mixed one, because here's the thing. You can have yourself not be free because you were taken advantage of by a corporation who then decides to offshore your jobs, because, you're demanding higher labor standards in America and they can do it for cheaper overseas and then just ship the products back. And does that make you free? Really? Because you're bound by listening to this corporate entity because you don't have proper negotiating leverage? I don't think so. But at the same time, if you have a completely command economy, or like an absolutely like restricted trade economy, like, you're also not very free to actually make choices as well. So this is a real hard one. I'm going to go with generally agree, though, because here's the thing. When it comes to people who I think are upholding these common standards, whether it's environmental standards, labor rights, intellectual property, what have you, after they've fulfilled those criteria, I fully think it is to our benefit to do free trade with those nations. So I'm going to agree because I generally lean that way, but I do think there are certain standards we should be looking to uphold before we engage in free trade. So I do hybrid free and fair trade. Next, it is a sad reflection on our society that something as basic as drinking water is now a bottled, branded consumer product. I have mixed. I agree. I agree here because like water is one of those things that we should all have as public ownership. But I don't think it's like a crazy notion that people could take something basic and attach, I don't know, a filtration method, a sourcing method, a branding behind it to then make it a product. I don't think that's that sad, but I like, since this is like specifically talking drinking water, like I do think that should be publicly owned. So I'm not going to go to strongly agree, but I'm going to go to agree. Next, land shouldn't be a commodity to be bought and sold. I agree. Obviously, I think you should be able to do what you please on your land. We should have private ownership. But I do like the semi kind of communal model where if you're not actually using a property, it's like basically vacated, then it should be returned to the public. This was largely how a lot of Native American tribes, frankly, operated their own systems in regards to land ownership. They allowed people to, use it and control what crops they had on it and the methods that they used on their lands. But once it was no longer being used, it was returned to the village to be used for communal purpose. So I think we should allow land ownership, but I don't like it being turned into such a commodity and hoarded, because that is leading to a large exacerbation in people being able to just live like freely. Like if you don't own a piece of land yourself, you're bound by the authority of someone else. And so I agree to private ownership rights, but I don't like how much we've commoditized land. And I think we should, frankly, tax the value of the land. That way, everyone is at least a shared stakeholder in it. And people who own a lot of it that might be vacant are still paying for that and might eventually want to return it to the public. So I'm going to agree that land shouldn't be a commodity to be bought. Well, no, I'm going to, like, you have the right to sell your property. If you want to move somewhere else, you should be able to sell your property. But I think we do it to a largely abusive level. So again, it's a balancing act. Next, it is regrettable that many personal fortunes are made by people who simply manipulate money and contribute nothing to society. I strongly agree with that. Mind you, I work in finance. Not all of it is just simply manipulation of money that people make it. There's a lot of research in trying to make sure that money is getting to where it needs to go. But the actual manipulation of money does exist, and it is shameful how much money it makes off of that. And labor does not get nearly the worth of value And we currently reflect that in that capital gains are taxed less than we do our current labor income. So yeah, I strongly think it is regrettable that they are making money off manipulation of our markets and contributing very little to society. Frankly, when they do that, they're stealing from society, because that market manipulation is coming from a bunch of people who were not manipulating the market getting taken advantage of. So yeah, that is how I feel about that. I strongly agree. Next, protectionism is sometimes necessary in trade. Strongly agree. We talked about this already. It's sometimes necessary. We should hold certain standards before doing fair trade with people, or before doing free trade with people. And after they've cleared those protectionism thresholds, we should then do free trade with them. So next, the only social responsibility of a company should be to deliver a profit to its shareholders. I disagree. I think some of the responsibilities of a company should also be being a good community stakeholder. It should be making sure that you are a good steward for your employees. There are a lot of responsibilities beyond just making profit for shareholders. I think it is the responsibility of every business that is doing, in a community. They should be respecting the community and not externalizing their costs to people who aren't working for them or who aren't the shareholders. They should be eating their own costs rather than the places they do business in. And likewise, employees deserve to have some say in how business is being done in their organizations and have some form of democracy. So I think it is the responsibility for both employees and community to be treated well by corporations. So I strongly disagree on them saying profit is the only motivation. Next, the rich are too highly taxed. Strongly disagree. They are not nearly taxed enough. And when it came to the Trump tax cuts, they finally reached a point where they were no longer the highest marginal group being taxed, the very wealthy, because of all the damn loopholes that they got. So yeah, no. And even in a historical framework, we are not even close to where we were when we were at our peak economic growth during like the 50s and 60s. Now, mind you, there are other economic factors as well, but to say that a 60 or 70% tax rate is a economic killer, the data just didn't back that up. So I strongly disagree that the rich are too highly taxed. Next, those with the ability to pay should have access to higher standards of medical care. I agree with that statement. I think everyone should have access to basic levels of medical care. No questions asked. They should have a free system, like a single payer plus plan. But yeah, I do think if people want to pay more to get like at home service or luxury care, yeah, I think people should be able to get higher standards if they're willing to pay for it. I do think that makes sense. And you know what? I don't think that every private practice has to accept the public plan. It'll certainly kill a lot of business that they can obtain, but a doctor has their right to not accept it. And they could instead just do private business with individuals directly. And if someone wants to go to them and pay more than they would through the public system, go at it. Go right ahead. So I agree that people should be able to do it. The reason I'm not doing strongly agree is I do not think people should be able to pay to jump the line. That is the one thing that I don't agree with. I do not want to have any corruption in the system where someone can simply pay more to hop the line. That is how you're going to still keep the same problems of our existing system of poor people not being able to get healthcare that they desperately need. So only in agree. Next, governments should penalize businesses that mislead the public. Strongly agree. This is just basic consumer protection and protection of your own citizens. They are being victimized by a group under misinformation, and that group should be held accountable for that. So yeah, wholly agree. We should be having penalties for businesses that are misleading the public. A genuine free market requires restrictions on the ability of predator multinationals to create monopolies. Strongly agree. It's not really a free market when it's just captured by one individual stakeholder that prevents anyone from entering the industry, and frankly, even uses their lobbying power to get regulators and lawmakers to make laws and enforce laws that allow them to continue to grab an even stronger hold on the industries that they work in. So, Yes, I do agree. We do need to be intervening on, monopolistic tendencies. Let me continue onward here. Let me take a break as we're going to the next page. Let's see who we got here in the chat. Want to see more? Hello, how are you doing today? It's glad to be able to see you. It's glad to be able to see everyone out there. And while we're taking this, I hope everyone's having a great day. Let's go to page 3 now. We got abortion when the woman's life is not threatened should always be illegal. I strongly disagree. It is not, in my opinion, human life until it exits the body of a woman, essentially. Or frankly, in the future, that definition will change. But, it's once the baby can basically be self-sustaining outside of a womb. Because right now they're developing artificial wombs to not necessarily have women need to carry babies to term. So I think that is the basic definition of when life starts, in my opinion. Otherwise, until then, and it might seem dehumanizing to those who do consider them human, so I apologize to that, but they are a parasitic entity on the mother, and they are taking nutrition from them. It is a active parasite. And so I think a woman has that right to remove a parasite from her body if she so chooses. And I think it's also a property right kind of definition. I think at least like until the baby is 50% to term, the woman has majority ownership stake over the child, I think. And then as it gets closer to, being 100% and now it's outside the womb, now the state starts to intervene and have somewhat of a level of ownership over the child. And I say that because, the state is allowed to intervene with actual living babies who are being abused by their parents and taking them away from their parents. So they have that like authority over children once they're outside the womb. So, when it is at the start of a baby's life, or in not a baby's life, but a fetus's life, it's at 0% likelihood to, get outside the womb. But as it gets closer and closer, getting 100% likely to be delivered and become an actual life. So in my opinion, it's at like that 21-week mark where you're kind of at that 50% threshold in even terms of property rights. So like at a bare minimum, we should be having the first 2 trimesters be legal. Personally, I think it should be throughout, and that should be left as a decision solely to doctors and women to control their own bodies. The notion that people are just willy-nilly wanting to do 3rd trimester pregnancy abortions is just outlandish. It is such a small percentage of it, and I just don't think that is the right. You don't know the circumstances of what that individual is going through at that time. And so, yes, we should see maybe if we can have the child have a C-section to come out, but otherwise, I think that should be a decision left solely to the woman and her doctor. So I strongly disagree with this statement. Next, all authority should be questioned. Boy, is this a hard one. I'm going to say strongly agree, but I'm going to say that with a caveat. All authority should be questioned, but that doesn't mean that all authority is necessarily lying to us or against us, or is necessarily even wrong. But we should constantly take what we define as truth and the arbiters of truth and challenge them to continually prove that against new claims that might otherwise show problems with their claims. Because I don't think we are in a good place where there is such a deep level of distrust of our institutions. These are people who take time to try and properly study these matters, and I get it. There are also instances where they are manipulative and lie to the public too. So we should always be questioning them, but like questioning them doesn't mean that you automatically think that they're lying or wrong too, because they deserve to, be tested on why is their claim correct. So yes, always question them, but that doesn't mean always don't believe them. Just people should be challenged on why they believe what they do. So yes, always question authority. Next, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. So I disagree with this. I get it's in principle. It's trying to say like you should have proportionate punishment. But I think that is the wrong goal. I think, frankly, what the goal should be is how do you rectify behavior and prevent others from being victimized, and as well provide justice to those that have been victimized already. And so that doesn't always have to be an exact thing like an eye for an eye or a tooth for a tooth, or if you kill someone, you have to have the state kill them. I'm against the death penalty, and I think this line of logic often leads to that. I don't believe it is the role of government or society to, frankly, continually do these vicious cycles of violence. So, no, I don't agree with an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. Next, taxpayers should not be expected to prop up any theaters or museums that cannot survive on a commercial basis. So I kind of agree, but I kind of disagree. Like, if you are the taxpayers and you as taxpayers want a museum, go for it. That is what you want. You should not be denied. But like, if you're asking me if I want to fund like museums in my area, not particularly. I get it. It's an educational thing, kind of like our schools, but I don't think it's inherently, and it's kind of, I'm thinking on this more because I'm thinking it kind of provides a similar service as libraries. And so, yeah, you know what? Some basic amount of funding for preservation of history and being able to educate the public better. I think that's worth it. I sometimes worry if like that should be prioritized over other items, but you know, I can see the value in publicly funding this because, well, otherwise there's only going to be the like flashy things of history, and what's flashy in one sense might be biased for another point in history that something might be important. So I don't know. I'm mixed there. I am going to say, though, that I disagree. Next, schools should not make classroom attendance compulsory. I actually strongly agree with this. And here's my reasoning. Kids should go to school, but the reason they should go to school is because it provides value, and they want to go to school because it's providing them value. Making it compulsory and trying to punish parents for their kids not going makes no sense to me. You should simply want it to be an environment that people want to come to. Like that's exactly how it should just be done. We don't need people going to juvie. We don't need parents getting fined. Like that is just going to hurt poor people, frankly, the most. And they don't need to deal with that. All people have their rights, but it is better for all of us that different sorts of people should just keep to their own kind. I mean, this clearly has like segregation tones to it, which I do disagree with. But like it is also trying to keep it like vague. But nah, I just disagree with this like altogether. Like this is why we do the Commoners Corner. I want to hear from people of different perspectives, different faiths, different racial backgrounds, different genders. I want to understand a wide variety of perspectives. And I think you can see this even from our military. Like they personally say one of the greatest strengths of the military is their diversity because it really heightens their critical thinking skills. And they're, you know, they don't always have all of the answers in one perspective, in one background. So diversity really helps us to have a more complete picture. So I strongly disagree with them. Next, good parents sometimes have to spank their children. I debate on that. I don't think you have to. Yeah, like this is the word I disagree with. Like have to. I think like it can be a method for some parents and it might work in certain circumstances, but it also shows that it leads to a lot of other problems too, like for children in trauma, in frankly, in their own willingness to then do it to their own kids. Like, I'm not an expert on this. I'm not a parent myself. I disagree. I know there are certain circumstances where you need your child to really respect your authority, and you don't want them to just feel spoiled that it's only good things that they get. Like there's never anything. Like one of the problems is sheltering people away from any consequences in life. Like life has consequences that aren't always positive reinforcement. But I don't know. I'm just going to put it out there. I'm not sure. I would not spank my own children if I had them. That's all I'm going to say. It's natural for children to keep some secrets from their parents. I strongly agree. They are their own individual people at the end of the day. And they are right to keep some secrets if they feel like that's what's going to protect their safety. It's unfortunate that some people are homophobic or, I don't know, anti-trans or what have you, but some secrets kids don't feel safe bringing to their parents, or like they're just sexually active in general. And obviously, you as a parent should want to foster an environment that makes them feel comfortable and wanting to disclose these types of things to them. But yeah, it's completely natural for children to keep secrets. Possessing marijuana for personal use should not be a criminal offense. Strongly agree. Who am I victimizing? That's how I put it. Who am I victimizing? Now I get it. Like if you tell me it should be a crime for someone to be high while driving, we can agree there. You're under the influence using a motorized vehicle. You're assuming the liability of that, and you are recklessly endangering people's lives by being under the influence. But possession, personal usage, no, you're not victimizing anyone. The prime function of schooling should be to equip the future generation to find jobs. The prime function, it is a definite key function, but no, it is not the prime function. The prime function is to educate children to be proper adults. And now, mind you, part of that might be inclusive of finding jobs, but no, it is trying to teach them critical thinking skills. It is trying to teach them life skills. It is trying to teach them basic cultural references. It is teaching them how to do, just how to express oneself through the English language, how to do basic calculations for like everyday tasks. Like, no, the prime function of schooling is to prepare kids to be adults. That's it. In my opinion. And now, mind you, there are then specialty schooling and advanced schooling that then helps you be even more adulting in a specialized field. But no, that is just not the prime function of school. Mind you, we should increase the effort because I don't think we're doing an effective job at getting people jobs out of school, but it's just not the prime function. Next, people with serious inheritable disabilities should not be allowed to reproduce. I strongly disagree. It is a human right for every person to be able to reproduce. Now, mind you, should everyone do it? No. They should be responsible and only bring a child into this world when they feel capable of being able to take care of it. But I strongly disagree that we should be putting any form of restriction on people's ability to have children. Now, mind you, you might say we should restrict people's ability to continue being parents if they are abusing their children, which I agree with, but we should not be stopping anyone from having children, in my opinion. Next, the most important thing for children to learn is to accept discipline. I disagree only because I do not think it is the most important thing. It is important, but I do not think it is the most important. There are many things that I'd love for people to learn instead, critical thinking skills, empathy, basic, actually, I'm just going to stick with those. I'm not going to discredit the importance of discipline. It's one of the things that, frankly, I wish I was taught more as a child, but I don't think it is the most important thing. So I'm going to disagree, but not strongly disagree. Next, there are no savage and civilized people. There are only different cultures. No, I mean, I'm going to have it's weird to just have it defined like savage because it's such a broad term. Do I think there are certain practices that are wrong and bad in certain societies? Yeah, I think every, frankly, society has some of those issues. I just worry it's kind of like it's on a scale, and it's a really judgmental thing to say because it's like you look at like other civilizations who then look at us. It's like, would they consider us all savages? Maybe, maybe not. Um, but I agree. I think we can disagree with individual practices without classifying whole groups of people as savages. Because I think it's also, you have to assume it's like you're judging their character as a savage compared to like, could it just be the exposure that they have to certain information? It can be ignorance at times. And so I hate trying to characterize people as such. Next, those who are able to work and refuse the opportunity should not expect society support. Strongly disagree. Every person in the society should have some expectation of support from society. I think, obviously, they shouldn't be afforded like comforts, but I think basic standards of living, yeah. Because I think also the notion that work is the only thing that someone can contribute value is a false notion. And I think when we do this, we end up causing harm to those who are looking to contribute because we just want to penalize those who we think are not contributing. So I strongly disagree with that notion. Next, when you are troubled, it's better not to think about it, but to keep busy with more cheerful things. Boy, this is a hard one. I'm going to disagree. Sometimes it's necessary to actually grapple with the problem, so that it doesn't just keep reoccurring, but you actually take moments to address it. Shame sometimes is a good thing. It's how we know when we need to try and grow. But I don't think it's healthy for people to dwell on negativity. We get to choose how we use our time. And I think often we kind of are so focused on beating ourselves up about things that we don't take the actual time to just improve on the subject. Sometimes we focus too much on like analysis and not on just doing. So grain of salt, but yeah, sometimes it's better to be able to just think about the actual issue because it's worth actually addressing. So I'm not going to agree with this statement. Next, first generation immigrants can never be fully integrated within their new country. I don't know. Like I'm going to disagree. I think there are some parts that are really hard for someone in trying to culture to America, like especially if you come as an adult, you don't go through the same education system. There's always going to be potentially some divide based on like accents. I feel like it really depends on how you define fully integrated. If you mean like a contributing member who can be an upstanding citizen following the law and is giving back to society, like, yeah. Someone who loves, yeah, they can easily be someone who loves America. Like, I think it's not going to be the same ever as if they were born in America. There is just a different life experience. But I do believe they can be integrated fully into society. So I disagree with that statement. Next, what's good for the most successful corporations is always ultimately good for us all. No. It can be maybe good for the CEOs and C-suite of that company, but it is not necessarily good for us all. They might be so successful because they are internalizing all that profit and externalizing all that cost. So yeah, strongly disagree. Next, no broadcasting institution, however independent its content, should receive public funding. Strongly disagree. I think the things like we do on NPR and PBS are all legitimate news organizations that help provide education. And I think it's like, obviously, there's going to be a question of how much do you fund it? But I don't think it's a reprehensible idea that the public might want to fund some forms of educational content. Just makes sense to me. It's just another way of trying to help provide for the public education of society. Let's continue onward. Let's see. So our next one, our civil liberties are being excessively curbed in the name of counterterrorism. I agree. We have too much of a surveillance state right now where people's rights are being constantly curbed in the name of counterterrorism. Yeah, this is definitely the case in terms of like this past year when we've been seeing how much of a crackdown they've done on all the protests, legal protests too, even nonviolent protests. Yeah, I strongly agree that they're saying that like any form of dissent is a form of potential terrorism that needs to be shut down. So I agree with you there. Next, the significant advantage of a one-party state is that it avoids all the arguments that delay progress in the democratic political system. Yeah, so I disagree. It obviously doesn't do all the arguments. There are clearly problems in our democratic political system related to the primaries as well. Now, the only reason why I even had like a moment of hesitancy, and I'm not putting it to strongly disagree, is because I don't like the notion of a one-party state because it's still a private entity having control over then the public government. But if you consider it a one-party state in the sense of having like no parties, that everyone simply runs as an independent, I actually like that. And so it's really just about the fact that a party is still a private organization that makes me disagree with this, and that it will inherently still cause problems with our democratic political system. Next, although the electronic age makes official surveillance easier, only wrongdoers need to be worried. Strongly disagree. This has been used as a measure to, frankly, go after a lot of protesters. So I strongly disagree. This is like, frankly, why they tell you when you go to these protests to show up in like masks, because they don't want you to be like tracked down for simply showing up to protest. And I don't mean that they're using this only on people who break windows of small businesses. I mean that they have been routinely doing this to just protesters on the whole, especially those who are the leaders of the protest, who are organizing the protest. So yeah, strongly disagree. Next, the death penalty should be an option for the most serious crimes. I strongly disagree. I do not believe it is the responsibility of a state for any person that it has in its possession to be administering death. It is a clear abuse of the power of the state to be administering death, in my opinion. Now, mind you, like obviously, you can paint all manner of issues under the sun that are terrible, and I'd rather just put that person in prison to rot for the rest of their days. It's cheaper, and I think, frankly, like if I'm that individual, I think that's a worse experience, having to suffer compared to just having it all end at one point. And then there's the case of like people getting it wrong. So like 10% of the death penalty crimes have been found to be wrong. So like, do we want to incorrectly sentence people to death? That's like a very irreversible thing. Unlike jail, even it's like. So yeah, no, I strongly disagree with the death penalty. Next. In a civilized society, one must always have people above to be obeyed and people below to be commanded. It's an interesting framing of that, but if you just mean, is society always going to have some form of class and a leadership hierarchy, then, or not even just America, but just society? I mean, to some degree, yeah, it's going to. It's going to have some form of leadership. Even the anarcho models that we've talked to guests with, they're going to have some hierarchy for them. And they're going to have an organized leadership group that some people are in charge of certain functions and make commands about those functions, and other people aren't and obey it. Like, yeah, so I'm going to go with agree. Next, abstract art that doesn't represent anything shouldn't be considered art at all. Strongly disagree. Art is art. It's whatever people get out of it. It's like it can be evoking of emotion. Just art is art. It's whatever someone looks to create. What I'm making right now, as much as it is just a video blog, it's art. It's its own form of it. It's a very catch-all term, and rightfully so. So yeah, strongly disagree on that one. Next, in criminal justice, punishment should be more important than rehabilitation. I disagree. I think they are both vital, but I do believe that rehabilitation is more important. Now, frankly, deterrent is even like another thing that should be added onto that. Like the whole reason they say punishment, it's like it shouldn't be about like making that person face pain, but the reason should be we want to stop other people from potentially doing that. So, I disagree. Rehabilitation and prevention are more important, and rehabilitation in general is more important than punishment. It is a waste of time to try to rehabilitate some criminals. Okay, yeah, I mean, I can agree with that. Some people are too far gone. Like, I'm not going to deal with this absolutism of every single person can be reformed. It's just not true. We should try, but after trying, you can see certain people stop trying, or they have conditions that make it near impossible for them to live a normal life and be rehabilitated and safe for society. So I do think, well, okay, I'm actually going to disagree only because it's like they say it's a waste of time to try. Like, you should try, but after trying, then you should kind of like ease up and recognize what it is. The business person and the manufacturer are more important than the writer and the artist. I'm going to agree. I think the writer and the artist make life worth living, but I think they don't exist. We can still technically function. It would be a depressing life, but like it would be a life compared to if we had a society just only full of writers and artists. We're gonna struggle to have certain things get actually produced so that everyone can function. So I'm gonna agree. I don't want to strongly agree because I do think that there are values to writers and artists that go above and beyond the business person, the manufacturer, in trying to kind of set that future vision of where we should be going and the morals of how we interact as a society. But I think if you told me like one job goes tomorrow, which one devastates society more? I think it's the manufacturers at the end of the day. So that's my take there. Next, mothers may have careers, but their first duty is to be homemakers. Strongly disagree. This is all dependent on, frankly, the people involved. We are individuals first. One person who is a man might want to be more involved in that role. So should that be considered an unnatural occurrence? No, it should not be. So I strongly disagree there. Next, multinational companies are unethically exploiting the plant genetic resources of developing countries. I don't know enough about that, frankly. I believe it. It sounds believable. I'm going to go with agree. Like, if there was an abstain option here, I would, just because I don't know nearly enough about, like, what specifically it's referencing. But because there's no abstain, I'm going to go with agree. Because I could kind of believe it. I'd need to just see more of what they're talking about. Making peace with the establishment is an important aspect of maturity. I actually agree with that. It's kind of like recognizing, like, how do things actually work? It's recognizing, like, what have they been able to build so far? Like, I have certainly been going through that process and understanding a little bit more about, like, is the Democratic Party like it is today? And I mean, you come to the fact where it's like, well, you do have a very poorly designed democracy, and one party, at least claims to want to reform that to, unlock things like public campaign financing, new voting systems, regulation on how outside campaign donations are being done. Like, there's so much, and I highly encourage you all to go listen to our democracy episode. But yeah, I think making peace with the establishment is an important part of maturity, because what we're all hoping for, realistically, is not just becoming a part of the old establishment, but it's building a new establishment. It really is. We want to be the new establishment. We want to be a progressive establishment, because the establishment simply means having power. And guess what? We want us all to have power. Frankly, I want everyone to become a part of the establishment. Like, that's the thing that I always find funny. Everyone wants to burn the establishment down, and all I'm asking for is let's make it work better and bring more people in. So I agree. And mind you, the only reason I'm not saying strongly agree is that I don't think you have to make peace with every aspect of the behavior of the establishment or even the old establishment. But the general concept of establishment, yeah, I think you do need to make peace with over time. That, or, I mean, hell, there are certain circumstances through history where you don't. Like, I mean, it's like sometimes part of maturity is just being real with yourself. So like things like the Revolutionary War, it's like you don't make peace with that. It's like you're being oppressed. And it's not like just becoming part of that establishment. It's like, well, they're not even letting you become part of it. So it's like, at that point, it's like, well, I'm not going to adhere to this authoritarian rule that won't even let me have a voice in the direction of how things are going. So, yeah, I agree. Again, this is one where I'd be like, I'd be neutral and want to just talk through it, but I'm going to say agree. Next, astrology accurately explains many things. Well, I'm going to say disagree. I think there can be some influence on like development timing within the womb based on environmental factors. But I also think that more often than not, astrology writes things that everyone can kind of attach themselves to and feel like, oh, yeah, that's totally me. So I'm going to just disagree, because I think it just goes too far. But again, it can explain some things. I don't want to say that it has literally zero impact. But yeah, I generally just disagree. Next, you cannot be moral without being religious. Strongly disagree. Let me ask you, can you have a moral set beyond what your code of conduct in your book says from thousands of years ago? Yes. Can it be better because it's not a 1,000 years outdated? Yes. Like, it's just crazy to me how some people think you can't be a moral individual if you're not religious. Meanwhile, those same people do immensely immoral things to people. Oh my God. I think especially when it comes to like the LGBTQ community, boy, they do such immoral things to those people for simply living like they are. But okay, next one. Charity is better than Social Security as a means of helping the genuinely disadvantaged. Strongly disagree. Absolutely horrible to just have to rely on that volunteerism. And it is just, it's such a, I don't want to shame people that do charity, but very often it is used for like tax purposes primarily. It is used as a means to bolster one's social image. Like, Social Security has dependability because you can depend on the revenue stream. Now, mind you, I would say that under normal circumstances, but Republicans keep trying to undermine it and cut out from under it. But in principle, like, Social Security would be much, much better. We should have guarantees of economic floors in America, and the elderly and the disabled need that floor raised a little bit higher. Next, some people are naturally unlucky. Yeah, I mean, I consider some people naturally unlucky in the sense that Well, you're born, and sometimes you're born into a non-ideal situation, and that is, in my opinion, natural unluck. So do I believe in this notion that it is an inherent thing, like a possession? No. Can people in those unlucky circumstances still become lucky people? Yeah. But yeah, I think some people just come into this earth inherently disadvantaged, and that's a form of being naturally unlucky. Let me keep going. Next, it is important that my child's school instills religious values. Strongly disagree. Do that on your own time, not in school. We should not be having indoctrination. If you want to send your kid to a religious school, go have at it. That's your right. But in public schools, absolutely not. Okay, next. Sex outside marriage is usually immoral. Strongly disagree. What's immoral about it? Seriously. Be safe about it. Be responsible about it. But it's just having fun. It's pleasure. Nothing wrong about inherently having pleasure. Next, a same-sex couple in a stable, loving relationship should not be excluded from the possibility of a child adoption. Strongly agree. They are equally capable of being able to raise a child. What children need more than ever is just more adults who are willing to give them love. And so to say, hey, sorry, foster kid, I'm real sorry. You have to stay here and unloved because you know what? These two guys over here, they love each other, and so we can't have them loving you. Like, what the hell? It's absolutely asinine to me. So that is my opinion there. Next, pornography depicting consenting adults should be legal for the adult population. Strongly agree. And it's very, very, very important, this word, consenting adults. Like porn that is not showing that should be illegal. Full stop. And they should be responsible for the content that they host, especially when they allow, certain platforms do this, they allow downloads of that content. So, yes, consenting adults should be able to do that. 100%. And people should be able to view that as they so please. But it must be with consent. And I am tired, even if it is real consent, I am tired of seeing rape fantasies in porn. That has no place in porn. That is not something we should even consider like taboo exploratory. It is just pure wrong. And it should not be considered a sexual thing. Or it should not be considered an acceptable sexual thing. Next. What goes on in the private bedroom between consulting adults is no business of the state. Again, important they use the word consulting, and with that in mind, strongly agree. Next, no one can feel naturally homosexual. Strongly disagree. This is a very common phenomenon through the natural world. So please, if you think it's unnatural, shut the fuck up. Okay, next one. 3 days openness about sex. Oh, these days openness about sex has gone too far. I don't know. I mean, I kind of agree. I feel like we're not encouraging like the responsibility aspect to it and really understanding the consequences. Now, I don't know. I feel like we are over glorifying sexualized content. Like people should feel accepted, but I feel like we're over rewarding it. If that makes sense. And that has encouraged people to be way more open than frankly we feel comfortable about. This is one of those where I'd be like neutral if they gave me the button, frankly. But if I had to pick, I slightly agree it's gone a little bit too far. And mind you, like I'm a pretty sexual person. I'm open about it, but I still think it's a bit much. It's like, it's to each their own. This is my own personal judgment. But there are other people who feel great about this. And frankly, I do like that people aren't being shamed and persecuted as much as well. So it's like, it's a balancing act. And I know I've said that a lot. It feels like a false equivocation, but a lot of these things are generally kind of gray issues. So I hope you all enjoyed us doing this political compass test. Let's now actually see what the results are. Okay. Okay, so this is where it puts me. It puts me at negative 5.5 economics, so towards the left. And in terms of my authoritarian versus libertarian tendencies, I lean libertarian. I will tell you, this has moved me since the last time I have taken this test down and to the left. My previous time taking the test, I was roughly around like here. So I am definitely moving more libertarian and more left. I generally identify myself as a geo-libertarian social democrat. So I am going to take this screenshot for my own record to share it out after the stream with everyone. But now let's take one more test as we wrap up here. We've been going for a long time, but I wanted to take 2 tests with you all. So let's now do the 9-axis quiz. And I want to take just the short version with you all. We could do the full 216 question version another time, but we're going to just do the short version for today. International trade is generally beneficial. Strongly agree. We can have efficiencies driven by different locations. Certain people are better at producing certain goods than others because of ample natural resources or education to become proficient in certain skills. So yeah, international trade is generally a good thing because it allows us to take advantage of all that concentration of expertise. Next, whistleblowers should be strongly protected. Strongly agree. People should be able to come out and report when institutions are actively harming the public. And they need protection so that they feel safe to be able to do that. Next, public utilities like roads and electricity should be publicly owned. Strongly agree. These are the basic infrastructure of our society, and we should not have price gouging occur from that. And we should have, frankly, when regulation needs to occur, not some group saying yes or no on whether they're going to do it and take the fines, but simply will do it. So, yeah, strongly agree. Next, testing products on animals is ethical. Yeah, I agree. Technically, we are animals too. So if you were to just do human testing, you are still doing animal testing. The difference is, I guess, you at least have that form of consent. But you are going to have to ask yourself, and this is a judgment statement that I'm going to have a lot of people have different opinions on. But I do believe, as humans, our responsibility, yes, should be helping to protect the world, obviously, but that is inherently to protect humans. The goal of humanity is to continue humanity. And so some animals are used in the testing process so that we can save countless lives. And so we currently do not get nearly enough volunteers to take these tests. And so we would really hinder our ability to do research if we didn't have animals to test on. But I will say, I really hate cosmetic testing on animals. Like, I can get it where it's like, if you feel like you're doing tests on something that can permanently harm someone's life or even go as far as kill them accidentally, I can see the value of using like mice and other animals to test on to try and reach those developments to be able to protect more humans. But for things that are just to try and make people pretty, like, God, like, no, we do not need as much effort into research in those areas. Get humans or don't make the product. So I'm only going to go with agree. I think it really depends on what products are being tested. If it is vital for the continuation of our species and protection as a species, yeah, I can see the value in it. But if it comes to purely cosmetic and pleasure things, no, absolutely not. Next, even when protesting an authoritarian government, violence is not acceptable. I disagree. And here's my reason why. And I am a very, very big anti-violence advocate. My reason why is if an authoritarian government is doing violence against you, it is not violence back inherently. It is self-defense. It is making a statement to try and rally more people that something is unjust. And so I'm not going to strongly disagree because I am very anti-violence, and I do not think that is one of the desirable methods of protesting. But I do not think that it is something that can never be acceptable. Riots are the voice of the unheard a lot of the times. So I'm going to disagree there. The more people asked, the better chance there is of reaching the best decision. I generally agree with this, generally, but it is not perfect. And it largely depends on the issue. There are certain things that are easier for people to understand, don't require as much subject matter expertise, and they can be good decision makers on. It's why one of the things we encourage is this idea of a hybrid direct democracy. You know, being able to do more ballot initiatives for the people, because generally the crowd is pretty wise compared to the individual. But some things do require subject matter expertise, and just simply adding more people does the opposite of good. So I'm not going to strongly agree, but I will agree with the statement. I support gay marriage. Strongly agree. I'm not even going to try and justify that one. They are equal to us. Love is love. Next, there should be compulsory military service. I disagree. I do not believe anyone should have compulsory work. I strongly disagree with this notion. I think it would be good to create opportunities for people to have national service, like more Common Core type things. Not Common Core. What am I talking about? What's the thing? AmeriCorps. That's what I'm thinking. They should have more of these like AmeriCorps type organizations that provide people a job that want one and help kids out of school, you know, build up their skills more and gives them job experience. But no job should ever be required by the government other than in the one circumstance of like a jury. Like we need people to be the people who judge a case. And so, yeah, we expect compulsory service on that. But even then, we have a very easy system of allowing exemptions in that process. So, no, strongly disagree with compulsory service. Next, border protection is important. I agree with that. It's generally like it's where you can kind of hold your jurisdiction of enforcement. Like if someone gets through trafficking people or drugs, and they're doing crime or violence in our area, and then they go back, we're going to struggle to, frankly, do enforcement on them. And so the idea is we should be trying to prevent these things in the first place. And furthermore, if you want to have like any regulated level of immigration to the nation, then you need to have some level of enforcement. So I don't think a wall is effective. Don't get me wrong. I strongly oppose that notion, but doing some border surveillance, I don't mind that. Border surveillance, border enforcement, and also, you know, increasing our funds so that more cases can get processed in a timely manner, and more funding so that those who are being held in humane environments. Yeah, that I do believe in. But I do also believe in borders. And I got to talk about that with Michael on our previous show, Michael Shimkowitz. We talked about open borders. So if you want to hear more of my opinion on that, go listen to that. Next, military spending is a waste of money. I disagree, but it's hard to say. I'm going to actually go to neutral only because I think we spend so much on our military, too much, and a lot of it is wasteful. But is military spending in general a waste? No. I think we should have a form of protection for our society. And, if we had no military, trust me, our relationship with the rest of the world would be very different. We would not have nearly the same authority on the national stage. So, no, I don't think it's a complete waste, but I do think a lot of it is wasteful, especially on so much like weaponry. So I'm going to go neutral. Next, strong states weaken a nation. I'm going to go neutral on this. I have a lot of feelings here because it's like, on the one hand, it does reduce our ability to have a true national identity when you have so many differences state by state. But on the other hand, it does help us produce more potential innovations from having all these different testing grounds to be able to try out ideas. And it also makes it so that we're not as harmed when our federal government makes a bad decision because the individual states still have their own authority. So I'm going to go with neutral on that. Absolute freedom makes a society dangerous. Yeah, because that's why even the libertarians and anarchists still have the non-aggression principle. It's not absolute freedom. Your freedom ends where mine begins. Abortion should be legal in all cases. I strongly agree. Strongly agree. The national government needs more power. Actually, I'm going to agree with that. And specifically, I'm talking about things like voting rights. I think we do need to be passing the John Lewis Voting Rights Act so that states are not discriminating against their people based on race or other factors. We need a little bit of a standardization in our democracy, frankly. So, I think that is a thing that the federal government needs more power on. So I'm gonna say strongly agree. We should be more accepting to other cultures. Yeah, I strongly agree. Now, mind you, we don't want to have no unifying identity. We are trying to be a melting pot. And so that means sometimes you also have to be willing to melt a little bit if you are joining the culture. And so that means taking some of the good things, taking some of the bad. But at the end of the day, you're still an individual. But we should be more accepting of other cultures. And I think a large part of why we've seen such a rise in Asian hate crime is frankly because of xenophobic tendencies, because we're not as accepting of other cultures as we should be. So I'm gonna strongly agree with that. Benefits of open borders would outweigh the costs. I disagree. As I said before, if you want to hear more of my opinion, go listen to the Commoner's Corner episode with Michael Shimkowitz. I'm going to apologize to Michael at some point. I'm going to keep butchering his name, and I apologize about that. Capitalism is better than any existing alternative. I'm going to go neutral on this. I'm a mixed markets guy. I generally think capitalism is better at serving certain industries, but I think it does a horrible job at others. And I guess your only alternative is comparing it, to socialism, but there are so many models of both socialism and capitalism that I'm just going to go with neutral, because I generally think it's good at some things and it's bad at others, and that we should use it for some things and we should not use it for others. So I'm going to go with neutral. It is necessary for the government to intervene in the economy to protect consumers. Strongly agree. We did that in the other test explaining why. Next, immigrants can never really adapt to our way of life. Disagree. We explained that again in the other test. Local governments address issues that the national government would never touch without them. I strongly agree with this. Things you never hear on like a federal level. I never hear people talk about like waste management. And yet that is such an important thing. So yeah, there are totally things that come up. And like even like hell, religious liberty and its influence on our schooling system and its intersection with zoning law. Like these are things that are very localized issues that, you know, they eventually trickle up and the national government has to take response, but it only starts at that local level to become recognized as an issue. So I strongly agree. There must be a separation between church and state. Strongly agree. I don't feel like I even have to justify that. Like, theocracy is bad, man. Let people have their freedom of religion. Traditions are of no value on their own. Well, so traditions have value inherently on their own in that it helps be able to pass on a culture and connect people from generation to generation, and also have people who are kind of coming into the nation know what what is part of the culture and like things that they can do to kind of embrace the culture. It doesn't mean that they're inherently all traditions are good. Some are bad, but tradition inherently does have some level of value. You can debate whether it's good. I think we are a little bit too bound by tradition, that we should be taking more initiative to set the values based on today's values compared to just leaning into the founding fathers. But they do have value, even if it's not like to the point where we should just always do tradition for tradition's sake. So I disagree. The government should not fund any religious organizations in any way. Strongly agree. Separation of church and state. State and local laws should have precedent over national laws. Strongly agree. Oh, no. Well, okay. So this is one of those things where it's like it really depends on the law. Things where it's like your local decision directly impacts the federal level. Like, for instance, right now, democracy laws are set on the state and local level. But they are doing this on how do they vote in federal elections. So it is a decision that impacts the whole country. And so there are certain things where national law should supersede. And then there are other circumstances where it shouldn't. So I'm going to say neutral because I think it's very case by case. Next, the general populace makes poor decisions. Boy, I mean, like, yeah, of course they make some poor decisions. Like, are you saying net poor decisions? Like, are you saying they're net evil, net dumb? Like, I don't want to agree with that. But, like, the general populace makes poor decisions? Yeah. Did you not see who we had as candidates? Like, come on. So I'm going to agree. I'm not going to strongly agree. Religious organizations often provide better assistance to the poor than the government does. I mean, sometimes, but it's often because we're not willing to fund government properly, and religious organizations have a lot more unilateral authority. They don't have to like work through a legislature. I mean, often I'm gonna go neutral. I mean. Because there are some religious organizations that actively do harm to poor people too. I don't know. I'm going to go neutral. I don't have enough analysis to make a conclusive statement. I think we would be better served long term if government stepped up and did a better job and had religious organizations need to do less. Human-caused climate change is currently one of the greatest threats to our way of life. I strongly agree. And we talked about this a lot in our upcoming episode with Alan Ellison, so I'm really looking forward to that. It'll be coming out in early April, so look forward to it next week. Next, we must go back to a basic way of life without modern conveniences. I strongly disagree. We need to be moving forward. Now, mind you, I do think we are a bit overstimulated and we need to be responsive to how we as humans interact with our technology. But I don't think the path forward is making life like less capable. It is making society more capable. And so I'm going to disagree. I'm not going to strongly disagree because I do think there are excesses that we should scale back. But I think overall, we need to move forward rather than go backwards. Next, we should respect those who have served in our military. I'm going to say neutral. It's like, well, anyone could have gone in there. It's like, what'd you do while you were serving? Like, did you do a war crime? Or did you protect people and help out? Like, there's so much of what someone could have done in uniform that I'm not going to just inherently respect you for wearing a uniform. You're just doing a job like anyone else. It's like, well, what do you do in that job? So I'm just going to go neutral. I do think the left goes way too far and just accuses way too many service members of being war criminals. Don't get me wrong. And that they do deserve support, that veterans deserve our assistance because they face unique traumas that they went through from trying to serve our country. And I mean, to be fair, I'm gonna actually move it to agree only because I think we should just be respecting people in general. And so I'm not going to go strongly agree because I don't believe they should get like special respect inherently. But yeah, they deserve respect for doing a public service job. So yeah, thank you to those of you who are doing a good job out there for doing that. Thank you for serving our country. For those of you who are doing war crimes and make us continue to seem like an imperialist empire abroad, I am not thanking you for your service. Go fuck yourself. Next, people should have the power to choose their leaders. Strongly agree. Next one, international aid is a waste of money. Disagree. Depends on the aid. They can have different levels of impact, but no, I mean, it generally helps us. I don't get why people think that this is a waste of money. It's just trying to prevent the excess costs of poverty and chaos a lot of the times. So, yeah, no, it's not a waste of money. But I get some people, and I am one of them, who thinks we need to be doing more investment at home before we start feeling like we can take care of the entire world too. So I'm going to say disagree. Most bad things happening in the world are caused by us turning away from religion. Strongly disagree. Mind you, there are some negative aspects to losing religion. And the main one is that we are just becoming more and more socially isolating. But apart from that, I don't see much else in terms of issues. And there are many situations that are frankly toxic and filled with shame and anxiety because of religion. So I'm going to strongly disagree, but I do think, and we are trying to foster that kind of here in trying to foster a secular community. We believe it is important, vitally necessary, that people have some sense of community. And right now, religion prospers because it fills that need for people. But it doesn't have to. And so we encourage people to come join the community and let's start working together. Because I think, frankly, politics, in a large part, is replacing religion. They're very similar notions. Before we ever had politics or government, we had religious institutions. And it was basically a set of guidelines for how society should function. And so now, as people become less religious, they're replacing that by forming new communities, which generally tend to be political, because both concepts generally interact with a moral code, whether that be through the policy that they're looking to push or whether that be through testaments that they say their God created. Either way, it's a moral code that people are trying to put into the world. So I think we need to be fostering more of this sense of community, even beyond just like purely ideological partisan lens, which is why we encourage everyone to come join our community nights and just have a fun time with us. We want to play games and really get to just know people. So I'm going to strongly disagree with this question. Next, in the modern era, militaries aren't really necessary. Strongly disagree. Obviously, they become less and less necessary, but you got to have some people who are still administering like weapon systems. Like, yeah, so strongly disagree. There should be no police force. Disagree. I think that there should be a scaled back police force, but I do believe that there should be a police force specifically for trying to address violent crimes, as well as like gun trafficking and the like. That is their purpose. It shouldn't be drug enforcement. It shouldn't be handling mental health crisis response. It shouldn't be ticketing people in traffic incidents. That's not what police should be focused on. It should be focused on preventing and then solving cases of violence. So I'm going to disagree here. But I do agree that we can scale back the NYPD and other budgets across the nation. A group of states without a strong national government is merely an alliance, not a nation. Yeah. I mean, yeah, they have, at any point they could leave it. If they're just working together, at any point they could stop working together. But without a government that kind of supersedes them, they are just an alliance, not a nation. So yeah, strongly agree there. Next, society could not function without leaders and followers. I talked about this before. And they had it as like people who make commands and those who need to like follow commands. But I generally agree with this notion that there is always going to be some sense of hierarchy in society. Obviously, we can say right now, the hierarchy is way too vertical. But this notion that you can have a completely horizontal society and leadership structure just doesn't fly. It's unrealistic to the nth degree. Illegal immigrants do not provide a benefit to the hosting country. I mean, they do provide benefits. The question is whether or not it's net benefits. I'm going to disagree. Like, I am not pro like illegal immigration, but yeah, they do provide benefits because a lot of it are just legal workers who stayed here longer than their visa. And they do provide a lot of benefits. Like, what's it? 50 to 75% of illegal immigrants are still taxpayers. And they're not receiving government benefits too. So it's like, or at least federal government benefits. I'm going to agree. Or no, I meant disagree. I just got the wording wrong here. I'm going to disagree. Next, government should be accountable to the international community. Yeah, should be. Accountability doesn't always mean necessarily bending to the will of the international community, but it does mean being accountable to them. We kind of talked about this before about like, is it ever justifiable for a country to use military force against international law? And I said, like, yeah, not often, very, 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 very rare, but yeah, there can be circumstances when there are unjust laws. But even in that circumstance, we're still holding ourselves accountable. We're disagreeing still. That's still a form of accountability, is to be able to continue to disagree. Next, people should have to work for anything they get. Strongly disagree. Talked about this, and frankly, I highly encourage you all to go listen to the clip we have currently on YouTube featuring Scott Santins replying to my question about like the conservatives who just say, go get a job. What do you tell those people? Highly encourage you to check out that clip as well as the full interview with Scott. He gave a really nice answer to that one. But yeah, as we talked about during that, people should not have to work for everything they get. Those who do not work should die. Strongly, strongly disagree. We are not doing a survival of the fittest. Humanity has prospered so much because of our willingness to cooperate. Maintaining family values is essential. I'm going to go neutral on this only because I really worry about what this technically means. Like, the word has been such a bastardization that right now, a lot of the right wing uses these things to say, I oppose gay marriage and gays adopting kids, and I oppose trans people being able to identify as they'd like, and that if you're getting a divorce, that inherently is a bad thing. It's like, these are such bigoted views as well as just simplistic and myopic views. Like, divorce is actually sometimes a good thing. It means an unhappy relationship no longer has to be together. And it rose so much because we made it easier to do in the 60s. And that just basically mean, hey, all you people who are miserable in relationships, you're free now if you'd like. And that's not a bad thing. Inherently, I think it is good for society to have strong, healthy families. I don't disagree with that at all. And we need to be supporting people who are looking to have families. We need to be doing things like paid family leave, 6 months for both mother and father. We need to be doing things like making sure that we have like a child UBI or a child tax credit for kids so that you can continue to afford the ongoing costs of childcare. We should be providing quality education from age 0 through 18. There are so many things that we could be doing to help families, and I think we should be. But I'm only going to say neutral here because I really, really hate how they have bastardized this term into a term of hate. Next, diplomacy only hurts nations. Strongly disagree. It usually can help nations be better. Like, what? Like, this is the exact opposite. Like, geez. Yeah, it's such a bad thing to be talking to other nations about how you can resolve your conflicts without violence. Whoa. Crazy idea. Next, the United Nations needs more power. I'm not sure. I genuinely not. I need to do a much deeper dive into what authorities it has to supersede nations. I don't know enough to make a comment here. Catering to popular opinion is detrimental to a nation. Sometimes, but I'd say on average, no. Like, here's where I bring up my sometimes. Slavery used to be a popular opinion in the nation back when we were, ending it. Should we have followed that popular will? No. But on average, yeah, I think the popular opinion is right more often than it is not. And that on average, following the popular opinion, you will, on average, and I keep saying that, be better off. But not always. And there's a reason why it is necessary to sometimes take unpopular positions that you think are right and push them. We obviously push universal basic income here, but it has not always been a popular policy. That is a relatively recent phenomena from the past year. But before that, if you go even, 2018, like, it was polling at like 25%. We've done a lot of work to push that issue into becoming a popular issue. And so, more often than not, yes, I think we get it right when we have our popular opinion. But that doesn't mean we always get it right. And we have to be willing to take principled stands against the popular will and try to make the case for why our belief should become the popular will. But yeah, it's also one of those things where it's like, if I am in that unpopular opinion, I don't think that my opinion should necessarily get pushed through right now. I should have to earn that support from the public to actually want that to occur. Because I do think they should be doing the popular will. Their job is representatives. But that does mean that we have to make the case, and that sometimes we have to be willing to take a principled stand and say, nope, that's not where I stand yet, and let me try and convince you all. So I am going to say disagree, but the reason I'm not doing strongly disagree is that, yes, sometimes the popular will is incorrect. Police need more power and protection. No. No, they do not. Okay, so let's see what they graded me. Let's zoom out a little bit here. Okay, so they gave me, I am a moderate unitary. I don't know what that means. Let's see. What is this thing? So it's unitary versus federal. So, like, yeah, I believe some things should, I guess, be more localized, but not like everything. So moderate. I am mostly democratic, somewhat authoritarian, I guess. That one I kind of disagree with. I'm very pro-democracy. I'm an extreme globalist. Didn't think that. I mean, I definitely think we should work with the international community, but I definitely think there is benefit to our national sovereignty in making decisions for ourselves. I'm a moderate militarist. Again, interesting. More often than not, I propose using diplomacy over military means and would like to reduce the military. So that's interesting. They tell me I'm moderate freedom here over more than security. I'd say that's about right. I do prioritize freedom a little bit more than security, but it's a balancing act. Next, I'm a fanatic in terms of equality over markets. I guess that makes me very, I guess I'm more socialist than I think. And then next, they say I'm a fanatic in terms of secularism. That I would agree with. I'm definitely very secular. Then in terms of progress versus tradition, I do lean progress, but I can see some value in tradition. And then in terms of culture, they call me more of a multiculturalist than an assimilationist. And I'd say that's about right as a balance. And they say, of my values, the closest match is Trotskyism, which I find hilarious. I am certainly not a Trotsky. But I think this was still an entertaining activity nonetheless. So everyone, I am very thankful for you all for tuning in today and watching these political tests. Please let me know, how do your tests compare? Please, consider sharing it with us all. We're going to be putting it on our social media of what our different test results were from today. So please let us know what you think. As always, make sure you like, share, and subscribe to help the channel grow. Please check the link below that we have to our link tree for you to be able to sign up to come on to an episode yourself. And that being said, my friends, I hope you have a great rest of your day. I hope you have a, let's just say, a day full of joy, productivity, safety, and you get to do what you want to do. That being said, my friends, I hope you all